The only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's show, the topic is respect the process. You see, the fools in life, they want money, success, attention, playing time, a promotion right now, a leadership position right now, without taking the proper steps to achieve that success. So at the end of the day, you have fools that want things fast. They want it easy. They don't want to put in the work. The last thing they want to do is go through any type of hardship. Boredom, fear, tedious skill developing activities is their great enemy. Take, for example, a year ago, I was traveling and I see this guy at the airport. He might have been in his mid-20s, maybe late 20s. There's a possibility of that. The gentleman happened to be of Asian descent, and he was working on his martial arts. He was working on his kicks, his side kicks. Now, you have a plane that's about to take off within like the next 30 to 45 minutes. So, the people in the area, I remember it was gate C7 at the time, was starting, to fill up the area. And he was still off in a small place practicing his kicks. Maybe he was a high level student. Maybe he was a teacher or some type of instructor. But what I can say, he was practicing his kicks with ferocious intensity. He would do about 10 to 15 at a time, and then he would sit down and listen to, put on the headsets. A couple minutes later, he would get back and do 10 to 15 more kicks. Now, grant you, people are around. They're getting ready to get on the flight. And I found it to be impressive because here he is working on a martial arts, not punching, but actually working on some kicks. You have people around, and he is completely keeping to himself. He's not worried about who's watching, what anyone might have to say. He's just in his own little world. Now, I say that to say, at some point, you have to take into the account the hours that are needed to work on your mastery. At some point, you're going to have to account for the 10,000 hours of putting in your work and working on your craft. Now, as I said before, boredom, fear, working on tedious skill development activities is the great enemy for most people. I don't care if it's in sport, politics, the corporate world. There is going to come a point in time where you have to work on your craft. You might have to work on one little piece of your public speaking that is very boring. You might have a fear of doing certain things, and you just hate doing the same repetitive activity over and over and over. If you're not willing to do this, you got a problem. And what I'm here today to do is to give you some answers. And some of the answers to overcoming some of your great enemies when it comes to boredom, fear, and tedious activities is that at some point you have to take on an apprenticeship. That means studying, working with, or practicing with someone that's been where you want to go. Maybe they're 4, 6, 10 years, or maybe even retired, but they're ahead of you. They've already made the mistakes that you're making right now or about to make because they've walked through the landmine. And they can speak from experience. You're also going to need a mentorship, a mentor, someone that can hold you accountable. These are the answers to your problems. You have to find people that's been where you want to go to work with. You have to have a mentor, somebody that's going to hold you accountable, somebody that cares about you, and somebody that's probably been through similar experiences at the same time. What this all means is that you're going to have to endure hours of practice. What this means is that you're going to have to be willing to endure hours of practice and drudgery. You've heard me say this before, master your craft. There's the 10,000 hour rule. Have you thought about practicing your craft for 2 hours and 44 minutes a day for the next 7 years? This could be playing games. It's definitely practice, skill development, working with a team, working without a team, unofficial practices, the things you might do in the backyard, the things you might do on a tennis court by yourself, being somebody at the airport working on your kicks. You could be a quarterback in the airport working on your 3-step drop. But at the end of the day, there's always about 15, 20, 30 minutes of downtime outside of your normal activities that you can take advantage of. This is about mastering your craft. And to master your craft and to get to where you want to be, you have to respect the process. Take for instance, LeBron James. He was handed his first basketball at 5 years old and fell in love with it. However, he didn't start playing organized basketball until 9. You can see by the time he graduated high school that he already had 10 plus years under his belt from putting in work, be it practicing on his own with the team, playing games with his high school basketball team, playing the AAU basketball, and all of the different types of practices and skill development work that it takes to be drafted right out of high school. And to this day, he still reflects on picking up that basketball at 5 years old, playing organized basketball at 9, and reflecting on how basketball has changed his life. And you're talking about a gentleman that's been an all-star several times over that still feels like he can get better. He still feels like there's something left to master. Think about that. But nevertheless, you have young people. You could come into a game, you can come into a situation, you could start a company and have success early before you get to those 10,000 hours. And the thing about success early is often it can act like a drug. But the thing about drugs is they tend to wear off. So what I want to encourage you to do is while you're on the road to mastery, while you're working on your craft, I want to encourage you to pick up and learn some other activities that will teach discipline and patience. Because this is what's stopping most people. There's a fear, but they don't want to. Part of that fear is having discipline. Part of that fear is having patience. And on the other side of fear is invaluable lessons. So sometimes you just have to do the thing that you fear. Sometimes you have to do the thing that you don't want to do. Sometimes you have to do the thing that you hate. There's going to be some things that you don't like to do. That's a part of your road to success. There's going to be some things that you don't like to do or that you don't want to do that's on your road to mastery. And this is what this is about. You have to respect the process. See, the tendency with early success is for an individual to let up in energy. They let up in focus. They spend less time learning. Take, for instance, I talk to a lot of high school athletes. So if you're a high school athlete listening to this, if you're a college athlete listening to this, even a professional, but you've been there before, the incoming freshman starts varsity, ends up making all league, all state, getting tons of honors. You start getting letters after your freshman season, and coaches, and I'm sure there's some parents out there, if you're listening to this, person walks into a situation, has some outstanding success, and then they stop working. Then they stop focusing. They spend less time learning their craft. They spend less time in school, period. And what happens? You see grades drop. They spend less time in the weight room, less time developing skills and overcoming weaknesses. And you've seen it before. As quickly as they got those accolades, shit fell apart even faster. And then they find themselves in a miserable like existence. I'm sure coaches and parents, again, if you're listening to this, you've seen somebody jump into a career, jump into a sport, have some early success, and then hit a wall. And then when they hit that wall, they don't know how to go through it. They don't know how to get underneath it. They don't know how to go over it. They don't even know how to go around it. That's what I'm talking about here, because you have to keep working. You know, what I want to encourage you to do if you're listening to this is listen to the haters with a grain of salt. Accept these accolades with a grain of salt. What do they really mean at the end of the day as far as your success? What do they really mean at the end of the day in terms of where you'll be 10 years from now? When you're listening to haters or accepting accolades, just put it aside. Praise it 10 years from now. Give yourself a pat on the back now. That's definitely encouraging. It's definitely a reinforcer, but don't fall in love with what a hater is saying, and don't fall in love with early accolades. That's all they are, is trophies or pieces of paper. Ultimately, you want to be careful of early success and illusions. So you have to be down to pedal in the slow pace to mastery. You have to accept that. It's just like the gentleman who transfers from a public school to a private school. He's a great player, has the potential to be a great player, but you're not going to walk into a top 10 organization and start right away. You're going to have to work up to that. And I witnessed this experience, and I explained to the individual, don't worry, learn the system, get to know your athletes, get to know your fellow athletes, get to know your coaches, understand the system. Things will open up for you. Don't worry about starting right away. Don't worry about a whole bunch of reps. Just learn the offensive system. Learn the defensive system. And by week 7, 8, and 9, he was having some outstanding games. But that's where patience comes in. You have to be patient. You have to do the tedious work. You have to work on your character and leadership from the sidelines. You have to exhibit character and leadership in the classroom. But at the end of the day, most people can't handle boredom. That means they can't stay on one thing until they get good at it. And they wonder why they're unhappy. Take, for instance, the sophomore guard that's 6'1", but you're playing JV as a sophomore. And not only you're not playing point guard, you're not playing guard, they put you at the high post. So what that illustrates with your height is you haven't worked on your dribbling, and your shooting isn't consistent enough to play guard, and you're probably not the best decision maker. And if somebody was to go back and do the research, they would probably realize that you stopped strength training and you stopped working with a basketball skills coach. You see, when you have access to resources, you have to take advantage of those resources. When you find some things that are helping your game, you have to stay with that. Michael Jordan, weightlifter. Kobe Bryant, weightlifter. LeBron James, weightlifter. Don't tell me that the proper strength training will not help you as a basketball athlete. That is part of your mastery. That is a part of your process. You have to respect the process. That means you're doing your practices with the team. That means you're doing your practices with your basketball skills coaches. You got to be working on your own, and you got to have a strength and conditioning program. When you talk about being a well-rounded, strong, dynamic athlete, whether you're playing football, baseball, basketball, softball, track and field, or any other sport that I'm failing to mention right now. But you see it. Parents, you see it. Coaches, you see it. You got people around you that they do whatever they can to escape boredom at all costs. They distract themselves from anxieties. And it's usually in the form of public entertainment, doing drugs, alcohol, and other social activities. You see, on average, most people don't want to sacrifice their pleasures for hard work. You got to have patience. You got to work hard. You will spend some time being alone. You have to be able to work alone. You want to develop the proper skills needed to be successful or to highlight yourself. It has to come with some discipline. You have to get on the road to mastery. You have to be proficient about the things you do. I promise you, if you develop some discipline, if you're proficient about what you do, you stay tenacious, the anxiety that comes with your challenges, eventually it's going to go away. As I said before, early success can ruin people. You know, take for instance, the incoming freshman high school football player. You might come in being able to quarter squat 430 pounds. Doesn't mean nothing at all. Especially when you have terrible form, you're slamming down onto the box up underneath you, putting excessive compressive pressure on your spine, it's not a good look. But if you're around some people that'll take all that weight off and show you the mechanics of hinging your hips and keeping the knees behind the toes when you're doing back squats and showing you where to focus your gaze to take the pressure off of your neck, maybe you start off lower as a freshman squatting, starting off around 135, work your way up to 225. But as we progress, maybe by the time you're a senior, you're a 600-pound squatter with excellent technique. But the brilliance has to be in the details. And sometimes the details means going slow. Sometimes the details means doing things over and over and over with repetition and tedious activity. It's kind of hard to do if you don't have the right people around you to show you the right way. It's kind of hard to do if you don't have people around you that's been through it before, that can give you examples and illustrations that if you keep doing the things you're doing, you're going to hit a wall, and the kind of success that you want will never be there. So I want to encourage y'all, wherever you're at right now, you have to have a larger goal. And as you become better at what you're doing, as you become better at your path to mastery, as you become better at developing your craft, things will become pleasurable. It won't seem boring. You'll stop hating certain activities. You'll stop disliking certain activities. And what generally happens is you start to see improvement. And with that improvement comes connections and new possibilities. You can't get caught up with the destructive side of technology, especially the social side of it. When was the last time you tried to get off Snapchat? When was the last time you got off Facebook, Instagram, and all those other social media outlets that connect people? It might not be all bad, but for some of you, it's definitely not good when you're consumed with it. It's distractions. The destructive side of technology can cause you major distractions and can affect your learning. And what I want you to know is that learning requires patience and the ability to endure the drudge work. You've heard me say this before. There are no shortcuts. Some of what you're going to do is going to be dull, repetitive, boring ass labor. So you're going to be put in a position where you have to master your patience, your fear of boredom and empty time. You're going to have to do this if you want to get to where you want to be. You have to master your craft. I remember hearing about the Thurgood Marshall story when one of the first Black Supreme Court justices, he had a practice. And when he first started practicing law, he lost almost all of his cases. He may have won 1 out of 10, and he couldn't figure things out. So what he had to do is to go in the system, pick it apart, and learn it from the inside out. And eventually, he won Brown v. Board of Education, which ended segregation of schools. Look him up, Thurgood Marshall, and learn his story because he went through the process. He mastered his craft. He stayed down along the journey, but he wasn't distracted by temptations. He didn't want to take a seat at Harvard, which he could have, and carved out a nice niche for himself. Instead, he went the road less traveled and battled and changed the whole system of law when it came to segregation in schooling. So what I want to do is leave you with 5 strategies for your process towards mastery. Respect the process. These 5 strategies are all a part of the process. The first thing you got to do is progress through trial and error. That's 1. Be willing to master something simple. If you're a basketball player, learn how to dribble with your left hand. Learn how to go left. Quarterback, master throwing a quick slant and a 5-yard out. It's simple things. Now, number 3, you have to internalize the rules of the game. Attune yourself to the details. And number 5, I need you to rediscover your natural persistence. Rediscover your natural persistence. Now, if you're listening to this and if you have questions, I want you to email me, Deshaun@sportsmastery.com. Don't be afraid. If you have questions, comments, statements, I promise you I will answer those. I promise you I'll reach out within 24 to 48 hours. I'm looking for a parent to interview. I'm looking for a parent or a coach to interview. I want to discuss the strategies that they use at home to develop mental toughness with their student athletes, because I feel like every success starts at home and then it goes on to the field. So that's what I'm looking for. Don't be afraid to like, rate, and review this episode on iTunes. You'll also see the link in the show notes to my course. It's The Edge. Click that link. I have a special surprise for you.